That's the one thing that we've always stood by with MyZone is accuracy of where we're providing, making sure that the device is fit for purpose. I went to the factory, I said, oh look, I want to make sure it's a red chest strap. And they're like, yeah, but it's under the shirt. No one sees it. No one does it red. They only ever do it black. And I said, that's exactly why I wanted to do it red. We have 3 principles with MyZone. One,
excellent. Dave,
yep.
I'm super excited to do this discussion together. I've been following MyZone, I believe, forever. Since I think the first interaction I had with MyZone was the screens that you had in the gym and me looking at the heart rate of everybody else in the gym. And that was one of the most exciting things that I started thinking about, because basically it's what we discuss about the health data becoming content. And then I've seen many Olympic Games, similar things that they stream the data. So I'm super excited about this conversation. Why don't we start by a brief introduction about MyZone, brief introduction about you.
Yeah, of course. So MyZone's a wearable platform, which it's a software, hardware, and a wearable platform that actually displays live data onto a screen. Telemetry displays it to a screen, stores and creates an online logbook for all the activity so that both the user and the coach or the facility has access to. We create that online platform. We create a metric around points associated with and broken down into different zones based on someone's max heart rate. And that's why we called it MyZone. So it's broken down to everyone individual zones.
Awesome. I've read somewhere that before starting MyZone, you were a gym operator?
Yeah, that's right. I've still got gyms. So I own gyms. I also own a marketing company that has done marketing for gyms for about 34 years, since 1990. So we've been involved in the health and fitness industry for many years. On one side it was about getting members into gyms, and then of course having my own gyms as well. But then on the other side of the coin is how do we keep people engaged? And that's where I went down the route of creating MyZone. It was like a passion project, shall we say, trying to solve that issue of the industry being famous for keeping fit people fitter. So how do we motivate the other 80% of the market? What do we do to make them engaged in health and fitness? And rather than keeping fit people fitter, we decided to focus on effort rather than fitness, and rewarding effort and the process. And so yeah, it went from there. So it was solving that problem of adherence to exercise. It was solving that problem of people thinking that they've got to go and get fit before they go to a gym. It was solving that problem of accountability for a facility to have their customers accountable and also the users accountable. Because there's too many, in my opinion, there still is too many black holes in data sets for a consumer or for a club operator. There are some systems where you can measure what they do on a treadmill. You can sometimes measure what they do on a selectorized piece of equipment. Sometimes they would do that. But then if they go and swing a kettlebell, or if they go and do some push-ups, or if they go for a run outside, there's this black hole in that member's data. But the one thing that goes with them, no matter where they do train, is the beat of their heart, irrespective of what they're doing. And so that's what we did. We set about measuring that. Our original tagline was making movement measurable, but then we moved it on to effort rewarded, because it was all about rewarding the effort.
And what was the first product at the very beginning, and how did you think about it, specifically launching that product?
So originally, MyZone, I was going to call it Mega Training, and it was going to be called Mega Metabolic Enhancing Group Activity. So back in the late 2008, 9, 10s, before, I suppose, the influx of functional training or group training. So I was going to have a mega cycle or a mega functional or a mega cardio. And it was all about different zone training. So you go down the different routes of zone training together. And so that was what I was originally going to call, but then, which was effectively a programming. But then I sat around, traveled the world, spoke to many clients around the world to ask them what they needed, and then ended up creating MyZone. So it was about creating a platform that could be used in any aspects. If someone was in the military and they went away for a couple of weeks, then it would store the data and come back and upload. A lot of people wanted it to be as frictionless as possible, which is what we set out to do, and got the patent on the wireless upload of stored data. If you remember previously, the old heart rate monitors, you had to sync to a watch and then the watch had to upload and all this, where we were the world's first to actually integrate straight from the device directly up to a screen without pressing a button, which we've got the... So we launched originally as a bit of a software play, and that software play was for gyms to be able to do spin classes or cycling classes, and to be able to telemetry display the effort on the screen. And then with Bluetooth 4.3, which is back in the upload device, people were able to do it straight to their mobile phone. And that's when we started launching our products, which involved people being able to upload direct to their smartphones. And that was our really inflection point, where we really got some global traction, because not everyone kept wanting to go back to the one facility to upload their stored data. So that was a bit of a game changer. And then we launched the MZ Switch, which is the world's first interchangeable heart rate monitor. So therefore it can be worn on the wrist or it could be worn on the chest. And so the MZ Switch is the world's first, and we've got the patent on it, the world's first and only interchangeable heart rate monitor. So if you want to wear it on your wrist, if you want to go for a run, swim, ride or cycle or a walk, it's fine on your wrist using PPG, which is photoplasmography. But then if you want to go and swing a kettlebell, if you want to punch a bag, if you wanted to hit a tennis ball, it doesn't work on the wrist and it doesn't work on the forearm. So therefore you can just pop it out and put it back onto the chest for a accurate reading. And that's the one thing that we've always stood by with MyZone, is accuracy of what we're providing, and understanding the industry, understanding the importance of the modality of exercise, to making sure that the device is fit for purpose.
Dave, you mentioned software at the beginning, then you expanded into hardware. Most entrepreneurs avoid hardware because it's really hard building hardware. What gave you the idea to go deeper and deeper in more hardware solutions over time?
Yes, so I think and you're right, it's very easy just to do a software play, and certainly nowadays with the cloud. But back in 2011, when I'd be chatting to customers or potential customers, the first 20 minutes of a conversation, you had to talk about what the cloud was, because people didn't know what the cloud was. People were thinking that we were talking in wizardry. But this is how technology's advanced. But also, no one did what we do at the time. And that's why I went around to create that. I didn't create heart rate monitors or anything like that. Polar and Sunto and Garmin have been out for years. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to create so no one had did it. So therefore I went, okay, let's do it ourselves and tie that in with our software. So you've got hardware with software, makes it a bit of a stickier business proposal. And where software, of course, anyone can run a software and pop up because there's no cost. But when you've got hardware that's in the same way, say a Peloton bike is hardware attached to a software program. So you could have just done, say, Peloton just as a software, but if you've got hardware connected to it, that's when it makes it so much more important in regards to sticky, if that makes sense.
Can you give us some insights about manufacturing? Like, how do you manufacture at the beginning? What were the learnings? How do you manufacture?
Yeah, of course. Now? First and foremost, there's a couple of things with MyZone. Rather than I went there with a problem to say, this is what I want it to do. It needs to do this. It needs to be frictionless. We need to make it. And it had never been done before. And so I didn't take that as an answer. Just because it hadn't been done before, I'm not going to accept that as a solution. So we've got a really good partner in China. So we do all the internal in-house. So we do all the development in-house, the manufacturing, because of all the BOM lists, all the semiconductor parts are literally based out of China. It makes sense for it to be manufactured out of China, but we control everything about MyZone and how it's manufactured, and it's our firmware that is flashed onto the device to make it special, so to speak. Because those that don't understand, you've got three aspects of technical applications. You've got the software, hardware, and firmware. The software is obviously the apps that we see. Hardware is the actual physical devices, but the firmware is the software on the hardware. So the hardware is redundant without the firmware on it to bring it alive. And that's why it makes it a little bit hard to actually, it's not something like if I want to manufacture a chair, anyone can pick up that chair and repurpose it, or a piece of gym equipment. With MyZone that combines software, hardware and firmware, you can't do that without that super source. And the one thing that we did do, which was a little bit different, is when I went out and I said, okay, we're going to be starting off with the heart rate monitors. That's what we want to do. And I said, okay, and the MyZone, you'll see it's red, obviously, and the likes. And I went to the factory. I said, oh, look, I want to make sure it's a red chest strap. And they're like, yeah, but it's under the shirt. No one sees it. No one does it red. They only ever do it black. And I said, that's exactly why I wanted to do it red. In the same way, and again, not my where I got the inspiration from, if people remember back up until about 2010, or if not before that, early 2000s, when the iPod came out, the one thing that determined whether someone's got an iPod or an iPhone is not the actual phone. It's usually in a pocket. It's the white headphones that goes to the ears. And so I was like, look, up until that point, whenever someone listened to a MP3 player, it was always with black headphones. And then Apple said, we want white. Now you can't patent white, but when you see someone with white headphones, you basically go, hey, that's an Apple device. When you see someone, an elite athlete or anything like that, with a red chest strap, it's a MyZone device. If you see someone with, and off the back end of that, from a marketing perspective, what we've found is a lot of people say, I saw KSI in getting in shape for his fight against Logan Paul. He lifted his shirt up, he's got a MyZone red strap on. And so from a manufacturing, and again, we can't patent being the first there from a manufacturing perspective, we're able to do it that. But Kyriakos, the one thing I'll say for certain, we went through an absolute cluster of fuck-ups the whole time. Multiple times. The first 3 to 4 years, it was trying to do something that had not been done before. We had recalls, we had multiple recalls to get it right. And then we finally got it work, because it was not all, you had sweat ingress, you had water ingress, you had the battery. Then we moved to what was an MZ3, which was one of the world's first rechargeable heart rate monitors. Up until that, you would have a Coin C2032 battery. Yep. Now, the drawback with that is that you had to really make sure that the O-ring was sealed if someone was sweating or if they went into the pool or anything like that. So we came up with a rechargeable, fully sealed rechargeable heart rate monitor, which we get the best part of about 7 or 8 months on a single charge, and which is quite rare. Now that we've got both the PPG as well as EKG, it works out anywhere between 3 and 6 months on a single charge, depending on how it's used. So these are all the different manufacturing iterations that we have been focusing on, and that what we decided, to your question before about not doing just software but just doing hardware as well, the reason being is that if we control the hardware, we can control the story for the customers.
Yep.
Because if someone just grabs a cheap heart rate monitor off a shelf and they work with the system, and then it doesn't show accurate on the system, on the telemetry display, then it undermines the whole integrity of MyZone. And so that's why we said, okay, if we can control it, make sure we get to the device, then that way for customers, it's one throat to choke. We can control and make sure that the user experience is the best part.
How difficult was it to find the right manufacturer in China?
It took a bit to do that. We did a fair bit of research. There's a couple of big semiconductor companies that manufacture the chip that's used in the MyZone's nearly used in nearly every single wearable or device and the like. So when you speak to some of the chip manufacturers who know who know the expectations from a manufacturing perspective, And a lot of it was actually going over to China, making the connections and building the relationships, which is what we've done for the last 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
And we have a strong partnership and relationship with our manufacturer. We really do see it as a partnership. But if I was to advise any other company or someone that wants to go out, firstly, if you want to go out and build your own heart rate monitor, don't do it. There's a company out there called MyZone that's got it nailed. But no, if you are looking for a manufacturer, find out what some of the key components that would be required for it, and then go and do your research that way. Go and do your research, and then meet the factory. We were constantly out in the factory, meeting, having a look at how the development's going, how the manufacturing's going, making sure that everything's done ethically and it's in the right way. And we do, and don't undermine, in my experience, the importance of relationships. And that's in Asia and the likes. We wanted to be a true partnership with our manufacturer to make sure that we work together and we all win out of it in the bigger picture.
Dave, knowing what you know today, if you had to find again a manufacturer in China, how would you go about it? As in, what traits would you be looking at the person? And I'm guessing that you didn't have a lot of time to spend in China and you had to do it very fast. So what would the questions that you would be asking, or are there things that you saw in the manufacturing plants, or some insights here?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I would do is I would find out what other products that they manufacture. That's an important one, because you'll see the quality and the caliber of what they do and who they manufacture for. And that is very important. If there is a particular product, if it's technical, if it's that you're after, find out. If there's a product that you like, find out who manufactures it, and that's a quality that you aspire to. And then you can go out and reach out to those companies directly. And they have a lot of their factories in China and Taiwan and the likes. They have dedicated people trying to boost their business. But the other thing too is it depends on where your budget is as well. If you want to NRE, non-recurring engineering costs, which will cost you money to actually get to a certain point, can cost you a lot of money. If you want them to help develop it, whether they want to OEM it, whether you've got the firmware, you've got the actual, all the technical ways so that you can control. In my mind, that's important. It's important to be able to have control so that you basically say, okay, what you are doing is you're doing the execution of what we're after, and this is what we need you to do, but have that control yourself. So that therefore it can't be ripped off, it can't be turned up in mainland China and the like. That's where you hear all the sorry stories. Business, in any form of business and starting again, it took us a few years to get it right, to get the right people, to get the right manufacturing, to have the right expectations before we got it right. And if I was to give any advice for someone is take a little bit of time when it's dealing with hardware manufacturing. Take a little bit of time with the hardware manufacturing. With software, it's okay. If you release an app and you've spelt the word fitness wrong, you can just release it again. If you send out 50,000 items and they have to be recalled twice, and I know this firsthand, it's expensive. And the credibility, you lose credibility and all this. But from a software issue, getting that out there and being able to if you make the odd mistake, that's not a problem. But when it gets to hardware, you've got to measure twice and cut once, because it's expensive to get that manufacturing process wrong.
Yeah. Speaking of recalls, like the issues you mentioned at the beginning, were these avoidable things? Was it because of inexperience or?
Yep, inexperience.
Yeah.
Yep. So absolute inexperience. It was me being eager to go, yep, it works. Me not having, or us not having the proper testing procedures in place to measure everything. I had my own gym. my local gym that I owned was the very first gym in the world to have MyZone. And at a stage, my members and my manager hated me with a passion because we had so many issues and technical issues with MyZone, but we'd already launched it out there. People were falling in love, and then they're going, "Oh, I love the idea, but I've lost another workout, or I've gone on holidays, I've had a workout every day, and I've lost the data." And it's what I would say is now because we obviously much larger now, we in a way you lose that startup pace for the ability to measure twice, cut once, and all that. So it's a different approach. Arguably, I love the fact that I say it now on reflection is that we made mistakes because we learnt, and it was a fabulous learning experience. At the time, it was terrible experience, but we got there in the end, and it was one of those that you've got that choice about. I've always said it's not the big that eat the small, but it's the fast that eat the slow. And there's very few big businesses in the world have not had recalls, or anything like Tesla. They've had recalls, and all these different companies have had recalls, even though sometimes the best process in the past. Now we had a situation where we launched the MZ Switch during COVID. We had various buttons that were different types of buttons that we used. We tested it for a long period of time, but what we found out was after 3 months of constant use of ripping off, on, the aluminum buttons softened, and therefore we lost connection. So we lost a lot of credibility by releasing, say, MZ Switch initially with buttons that would all of a sudden stop working. And that there was if I rewound the clock, could we have done anything different? We probably could have waited a bit longer till the stainless steel buttons came in, which is what we'd used previously, but we tested it for so long, we just didn't anticipate this type of usage of people taking the button off, ripping it on, putting it on, and it backfired a little bit.
If we get into the product a bit, you mentioned telemetry at the beginning. You mentioned it was directly on the TV. How did you actually do it? Did you have a sensor somewhere in the room, or was it on the TV?
Yes, that's right. Yep. Yeah. So we had our own bespoke receiver, which is a receiver that was connected up to a computer where our software application and that MyZone receiver would receive the signal from the MyZone device and then telemetry display to the screen. In every single MyZone heart rate device, there is a clock that ticks on every second. It ticks constantly, forever and a day. Then what happens is that even if it's not on, it's constantly ticking. A clock is ticking away. Then what happens is that when that MyZone device sees a receiver, the receiver's broadcasting, it looks around and it basically says, there's a MyZone heart rate monitor. It first checks and says, is there any data on that device? And if it is, it wirelessly uploads it. So it sends a token, sucks the data off it, uploads it to the online account, and then it starts streaming. Conversely, the MyZone heart rate monitor that's got a ticker in it, when you've got it on, every 20 or so seconds, it pauses for a second, and I'm making this as simple as I can. It pauses for a second, and it looks and says, is there a MyZone receiver nearby? And if it sees a MyZone receiver, it goes, hey, let's make a handshake. Let's upload the data that's from on that device, and then it starts streaming. What that means, and then the computer runs the application, so to speak, and it just a HDMI to a TV or a projector, and it shows it on the screen. What that means is that, Kyriakos, if you had a MyZone device in, and you walked anywhere near a MyZone receiver, your name, and the first thing it would do, I should replay, is that if that receiver sees your MyZone device, which is a unique identification for your device, it will look at that device, send a message up to the cloud, say, this device number, who's it registered to? It's registered to Kyriakos, then it would download your profile and show it on the screen. With MyZone, and just there's one thing that we've done which is different to any other system in the world. Any other wearable, it's a connection between the consumer and the wearable company. Okay? With MyZone, the connection is between the user and the facility. So when you register a MyZone device, it connects you with your facility. And so that therefore that facility, whether it's LA Fitness or David Lloyd's Fitness or anything like this, that facility has visibility of your data. So we are a B2B for a consumer product. So our business model was different to, as an operator, rather than someone having a wearable device, coming into my gym, having a wearable device, and I've sold heart rate monitors at my gyms for years. But the drawback with me as an operator, I might sit there and say, you need to have visibility on your when you work out. Here's a consumer device. Download the consumer device, buy the device off me, and then you could walk out the door and I could never, ever see whether I've seen you work out ever again. So you could just walk out and go, there you go, see you later. And as an operator, I have no visibility. But with MyZone, I'm connecting you as a consumer with my network, my facility, or my employer, or my school or university. And so therefore, it's marrying up the consumer with the facility and to make that partnership. And therefore, it can actually display that on the screen. You can participate in challenges and all that. And it's all about that network within the facility. And that's what we've done with MyZone, which is different to any other system, is that our distribution mechanism is, rather than spending $200, $300, $400 million and going direct to the consumer, our business model is we are a B2B, business to business, for a consumer product. So our software has to support the gym operator, it has to support the club operator, the employer, the university, the school, the police station or whatever. So that way it supports them to stay connected with their members and their customers. And so therefore we sell to the operator, and then the operator then subsequently either bakes the MyZone device into their membership, or they make revenue off the back end of it. And then the whole experience is about each community.
It sounds that did you build your own proprietary technology here? Because I haven't heard Ant Plus, for example, or anything like this working in this way.
Yeah, no, so the other thing that when we first launched MyZone, it was the first heart rate monitor that had every single communication protocol. So we had analog, which works at 5.3 kilohertz. We worked Ant Plus, so that therefore it would work with Garmin and the likes. It would also have memory, so it would store to memory. It would also do the MyZone protocol. So that therefore it would telemetry display in our own proprietary system. And it would also, when Bluetooth 4.3 came out, we also had Bluetooth as well. Wow. So what that means is that a user can go out, they can use Strava, Bluetooth straight to Strava. They could have their Garmin going concurrently, and then they could walk into the gym and their MyZone tile would also appear on the screen through the MyZone protocol, proprietary protocol communication mechanism that we did. So our view was, as an operator, rather than me wanting to sit there and go, oh, okay, if you want to do group training, put this heart rate monitor on. If you want to go out and do a bike ride, put this heart rate monitor on. If you want to go for a run, put this one. Where MyZone, I just went, let's open it up to every protocol, so that therefore, if people like Strava, use that. If you like Garmin, MyZone will talk to your Garmin. If you like, if you like Apple or Android or whatever, it will actually show on your Apple device, and it will show on your Android device, and it will show on the treadmill as well. Wow. So we wanted to make sure that it was
concurrent connections can you have now on it?
Sorry?
How many concurrent connections or users can you have on it?
In a screen, we've had up to 170 on one screen at once.
Wow.
See, because you have the restriction with Bluetooth. Bluetooth only allows up to 20. And so what we've found is that we've got some gyms where they have 50, 60, 70 people on the screen. But we've had anywhere between roughly about 170 to 180 on one screen once from one receiver.
And how would you say that the workouts are changing because of that? Like how, for a user that never experienced using MyZone in a gym, how would you say that their experience in the gym is going to be different?
The best way to describe it is, and what we're doing is we are giving if someone's driving their car, what we're doing is we're giving them the dashboard. They might, and fundamentally in regards to how many revs they're putting in. They might think that they're revving at 80% revs, but they're actually only at 60% revs. So there's more in the tank. And the one thing that we've found and the feedback that we've had is because when you display the effort on the screen, they can see how hard they're working out. So it's actually rewarding. If you don't see the intensity or the effort that you're putting in when you're working out, it's very easy to pretend that you're working out harder. When you're on the spin class, you can pretend to twist the dial to increase the resistance. But the one thing with MyZone, it actually shows what's on the inside on the effort that's put on. So that works for children, that works for kids, it works for Olympic athletes, it works for sporting teams such as Arsenal Football Club. So the entire Arsenal Football Club use MyZone, all their first players, their female players, their youth players. And the one thing that they've found is that it gives them a simple feedback metric, which is the hotter the color, the harder they're working out. So rather than talk in absolute numbers of 143 beats or 177 beats, that means nothing. It means nothing to 98, it means nothing to the majority, the population, unless you know what their max heart rate is. And your fitness is not determined by your max heart rate. Your fitness is determined by your resting heart rate and how quickly you recover. When you talk in absolute numbers, it means nothing. Oh, I just went for a run at 143 beats per minute. What does that mean? It means nothing. I just went for a run and I was in the yellow zone, which was 80%. That anyone can understand. Anyone can understand percentages. Does that make sense? If someone says, oh, I got 43 for my mark on math, and it's just like, okay, well, what was it out of? Was it out of 44? Was it out of 144? So the absolute number means nothing unless it's proportionality, and that's what we've done with MyZone. But the other thing that what we have done is we've created a metric called MyZone effort points, which is you get 1 point for 50%. So the colors are represented. 90% and above is red zone. 80% is yellow. 70% green, 60% blue, 50% grey. If you work out in the grey zone, you get 1 point per minute. If you work out in the blue zone, you get 2 points per minute. Green, 3 points. Yellow, 4 points. And red, 4 points. And the reason why it's the same as the red is because we don't want to push people too hard all the time. So you don't get any extra points. And when Joe Rogan famously did his Sober October a couple of years ago with the MyZone, him and Ari and all that were just going bonkers. And then he was like, oh, what's this MyZone? The fact is I don't get any extra points in the red zone. That sucks. And then all of a sudden he realized that it was like, oh, actually it makes sense, or else people are going to push themselves to the point of no return. And from a legal perspective, that just doesn't make sense. And when you go much above your lactate inflection point, it serves no purpose anyway.
You're touching on a point about insights and making it actionable. I'll ask you a couple of questions in a bit, but you also spoke about B2B. Like, I haven't seen any wearable company out there going B2B. How did you make that choice? And how did you approach it from the beginning? How is it going today? How do you actually get more businesses today? How did you sell at the beginning to them, and then how do you sell them today?
Yeah, look, the handy part is I've been involved in the health and fitness industry pretty much my whole life. So I have a marketing company that I've that has been in existence since 1990. I've had gyms. I've sat on industry boards for years. So from a connection perspective, it was easy to speak to and know the CEOs of some of the biggest brands around the world, to chat with them, to find out what they need. And also being an operator myself, and I still am, I've still got my own gyms, is that I see it through the lens of an operator. Okay. And we were at Consumer Electronics I spoke at the Consumer Electronics Show back in 2016 on wearable technology. And one journalist had turned around and said, okay, so every company what they're trying to do is they're tech companies trying to parachute into the health and fitness industry, right? In all due respect. And I've seen so many of them, tech companies parachuting into the health and fitness industry to try and sell their products. We are from the health and fitness industry using tech to solve a problem. So from that side of it, it was a different approach. And it continues to be the approach through the lens of an operator or an employer, to be able to see what's the benefit for my gyms, and therefore what's the benefit from there. So that business model was, I'd already had offices in Chicago, in Melbourne, and in the UK, right? And also had that connection. So it was easy to speak to key customers, and at the big international trade events, shows such as FIBO in Germany, or IRSA in the States, and Elevate in the UK, and Performex. What we would do is we would be there anyway, and that's where customers went. That's where the B2B operators went to look at new equipment and all this. So we showed up. We were there. And don't get me wrong, particularly in America, and I say this to all new budding technology coming into the health and fitness industry, is that year one, a lot of people will ignore you because it's just you a flash in the pan. Year two, they'll go, okay, that's interesting. Year three, if you're still there, it's okay. This tech is not just an overnight. You're here for a while, so therefore we will let's discuss. Now, of course, along the line, there are going to be the early adopters and all that, depending on that. So there will always that. But once in regards to full transition, full traction, it does take some time to validate what you are. And if you've ever been to Consumer Electronics Show, where there's a lot of last chance saloon people that spend a fortune on these enormous booths to try and put this persona that they are fantastic and wonderful in it. But the question's always, are they going to be back next year? Or is that palaver about trying to raise money to make it happen? And fortunately for myself is that I bootstrapped MyZone. So we had no Series A, Series B, angel investor, because I founded it myself with bootstrap my own money, so to speak. We were able to control our rollout, control what we spent the money on, we weren't answerable to private equity or angel investors. And so therefore we had it was coming from that right source to be able to grow at the speed that we did. And we've only ever organically grown. Obviously, we went through a private equity event in 2022, at the start of 2022, which was just a minority liquidity event, basically. But up until that point, and that was not for growth. It was not with no debt on the company or anything like that. That was effectively to I suppose, de-risk some of the management team that I'd given shares to.
Dave, you mentioned these trade shows, and that's the second time I hear this on the podcast. Last time, the founder of Hydro mentioned it, and he mentioned that it was extremely helpful to going to these events.
Which event? Sorry.
The trade shows in general, in terms of meeting the industry. If for a new CEO now or for a new founder now, if they go to these events, you mentioned don't have a booth. What should they do? Should they be approaching people they're trying to speak to, or how should they approach it?
No, I didn't say not to have a booth.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I would definitely have a booth if you've got the money to support it. because if you've got the money there to support, if you are going to these shows, making the relationships, of course you can save money by not having a booth, but it also doesn't mean that you're a real player in the space. So if you want to be taken seriously, what you need to do is you need to identify what shows that you're going to attend. You've got to identify the customers and the potential customers that you could do. We do about 47 shows a year. It's almost one every week. Now, some of them are big shows, some of them are regional shows, but our view is always looking at where are the customers going to be, and we want to meet the customers where they are. Now, of course, you can rock up to these shows and not spend any money and expect to try and meet, and that there is you can do that. It's not well respected. It's not well respected because what other suppliers are paying the money to get the customers there, and suppliers that turn up just to suckerfish off all the other exhibitors, it's not seen in a real good positive light, shall we say. Because if everyone did that, there wouldn't be a show. And if everyone did that, the operators wouldn't turn up, your potential customers wouldn't turn up. But it always sounds good, particularly for new business. Oh, don't pay for anything like that. Just go and scum off everyone else, which is not cool. It's not cool.
So how do you, being in a trade show, how do you stand out? Let's say that you do your booth, but I've seen in the last one I've been, there are people doing coffees, for example, so people were lining up, or like they're doing some sort of different things every time, so people spend more time there.
Yeah, look, I think if you are going to be doing a trade show, what you've got to do is you've got to be proactive on the front foot to find out who's going, to make the appointments, and constantly make the appointments of actually attending your booth at set times. Whether you're going to do an announcement at a particular time, of course you can put on free tea and coffee, and that is one way to support the customers that are there, right? But if we're talking about consumer shows versus trade shows, they're two separate things. There are two separate things. The Consumer Electronics Show is a consumer show, right? And that is effectively full of, say, private equity people going to see what's the next best thing, and consumers or manufacturers trying to say, oh, look, I'll manufacture what you guys do at you got to work out who your audience is and what you're trying to view. But from a trade show, a B2B show, is having a good plan, having a good location is always important, having whatever it is that you are showing off, so to speak, making sure that you've got the people, you've got the product, you've got the people, and do it that way. You don't need to spend a truckload of money on any other stuff, but making sure that your team have, and you usually do before a trade show begins, the trade show organizer will let you know, so you should be able to get the list, to be able to see who's there, and then make that, be proactive on the front foot to get those customers there and meet with you. But you've got to also look at what the size of the booth that you need, whether it's got to be reflective of A, your position, B, the size of the thing. So if you're manufacturing, say, big gym equipment, so to speak, you're going to have probably about different SKUs of equipment, right? So you can't really sit there with just one piece of equipment if you've got all this other, and you want people to try your equipment. From a software perspective, if you're launching a software platform, right, you don't need to have the biggest booth in the world, but what you need to do is you need to make sure that you've got enough of a presence so that you can, if you want to go through and show your customers or potential customers your platform or whatever, then you've got to make sure that you're a part of that, and you can make that space not go overboard, because there's nothing for you to think, but also it's got to be in line with the budget that and the importance of the show, so to speak.
It's very interesting because we attended a trade show very recently, and it was the first time that I've been there. I've never been to a trade show before, And I go there and I did not expect it to be so impressive and finding so many clients there. So this is a fantastic insight. I wanted to ask you about something else. I've seen a conversation, a podcast you had before. You spoke about the future of the space being in insights. I think you inferred from the conversation as well about having all the colors and making it easy for people to understand the data. Let's speak a bit about insights. What do you think that is happening here? What are the goals of MyZone in the space and making this actionable? And how do you help people understand the data better?
Yeah, so a big focus for us is on the actionable insights from the data. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If you walked into my gym on the 1st of the month, swiped your membership card, and then you came in on the 30th of the month and swiped your membership card, only 2 times, okay? I could pop up to you, historically, if I was that way proactively inclined, from the data that you've given me, to sit there and say, Kyriakos, don't give up on your fitness. You've only trained twice this month. Don't give up on your fitness. It's important that you stay committed. You turn around and say, Dave, I've been training for an Ironman. I'm doing 100 miles a week on the bike. I'm doing 20 miles a week on the road running. You don't know me, right? However, if you had your MyZone device, I saw you on the 30th of the month when you come in, I sit there and I say, Kyriakos, you are smashing it this month. I've just seen how much you've been absolutely smashing it. You're doing really well. What are you training for? Like this. Or even, I've already reached out to you during the week anyway to say, what a workout, what a week you've had. You've done massive amount of MyZone effort points this month. Well done, that your behavior's changed, well done. And you've gone, gosh, I haven't even been into the gym. This gym really cares about what I'm doing. Now, that's the stuff that we can do already. Where the real rubber hits the road is when we analyze exercise behavior. We run the modeling to sit there and say, if someone goes from, I don't know, let's just say you do 5 hours a week. 5 hours a week for the last 4 months. Then you drop to 0, then I know that you're going to cancel, or you might have injured yourself or whatever, or you've gone from 5 hours down to 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 hour, 1 hour, or you've gone from 3 hours to 2 hours 1 week, 1 hour the next week, okay? It might be that your wife had a baby and that your time is preoccupied, or you've had an injury or whatever. Now, where the true data intelligence comes from, or the machine learning, is by looking at the data of that change in behavior and sitting there saying, this person here, their behavior has changed. It looks like they're going to stop exercising. Let's intervene at this point. And that there is the winner in regards to data and data insights, is that if we can, and which is what is in our roadmap, is to model behavior based on, because for you, 3 hours a week might be a lot. For another person, it might be half of what they normally do. So that it's that change in behavior, and being able to turn around and sit there and send an insight to an operator to go, hey, this person here, jump on them right now, because it looks like they might stop exercising and cancel their membership. Or, hey, let us do it for you, and what we'll do is we'll proactively reach out to them to say, hey, I know you've changed behavior. What can we do to actually help get you more motivated to get back into action? Does that make sense? And that there is that's the real key to exercise adherence, is keeping people keeping on. And that's where the data, when I've spoken in the past, where the data insights are going to be. Then you take it to a whole new level, And the next level, if I'm bold enough to say, is to sit there and go, okay, you've bought a pair of shoes on this day. They normally run out after X amount of usage. If you've exercised, I don't know, however many hours of exercise, at that point you'll need a new pair of trainers. As you lead up to it, proactively sit there and make a connection with a Nike or Under Armour and sit there and go, hey, this person here is ready for another pair of trainers. Why don't you reach out at this moment in time to sit there and say, hey, that's what you're doing? Or the data insights are based on we've got elite ice hockey teams that use MyZone. And what they do is they work their calorific burn from their players to subsequently determine the type of meals that they can have. Again, this is the type of thing that we will be able to do. It's in our roadmap with MyZone, is to be able to sit there and go, okay, your training's changed from this to this is the type of food or diet that would best benefit your level of training. So there's so much that you can do with data and data insights to paint a better picture.
Dave, we are past the first hour and it seems like we can speak forever. I wanted to ask you a segue a bit and as maybe the final question. But by saying all this, you're speaking about a lot of hardware. You're speaking about manufacturing. You're speaking about software, about insight. One needs to really have a big team to do that. And I'm wondering, what's the culture like for the people that work in MyZone?
Do you need to have a big team? No, not at all. You don't need to have a big team to make things happen. What you need to do is you need to have a team that's prepared to deal with adversity. Because when you're starting out, believe you me, you're going to be faced with a lot of adversity. You're going to be faced with issues. We have 3 principles with MyZone. 1, don't take the piss. Don't be a dickhead. And 3, have fun. If people just don't take the piss, you're going to work hard. 2, don't be a dickhead. Don't be an idiot, because that doesn't work with our culture. And 3, have fun. And that's the one thing that the great thing about our industry is that we're helping, and certainly with MyZone, we're helping people feel good about exercise. That's where it sits at the core of what we do. So what we do is we share the great stories. We share the fantastic stories of obese clinics or people that have recovered that MyZone's helped them get through cancer, or people that have lost a loved one, but it was exercise and MyZone that kept them on the track. These wonderful stories inspire our whole team constantly. Yes, you've got the celebrities and the Olympics and the professional sports teams. That's one side. But when you hear stories and some really inspiring stories of people going through cancer, and MyZone was what kept them motivated and all this, it's those type of stories that keep us keeping on. You don't need a lot of money. You just need a good business model that can actually, and that can satisfy what you're after. And unfortunately, too many new companies come out. They've either raised private equity money or seeds and all this, and so they've got this massive cash burn. They've got this massive cash burn to be able to so there's this urgency from day one. If we don't sell this, buy this, and start making money, then everything's going to fall on its face. If you've watched and I'm sure most tech people have, is watched the Silicon Valley comedy series. We've all been through a lot of those journeys. A lot of it rings true for so many people. But at the end of the day, you don't have to be going hard. It's a part of the fun of being able to hustle, and it doesn't have to be perfect from day dot. You've just got to have your business model, understand what it is, stay true to it, test, and validate what you're offering before you go down there. That's the important thing. Because there's an old saying where, there's a gap in the market. But I always say that there might be a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap? And so what I would encourage, and as I did is that I had years and years of understanding the industry before I came up with the problem. This was not an overnight success. This is years and years of being involved in the industry and being aware of what's needed and doing a lot of research. You can't do enough research if you're launching your own tech company. You can't run it by people. If you want to get advisory boards, run it by people and sit there and just go, what do you think about this? And that's what I did. I traveled the world, spoke to a lot of people, just went, what do you think about this? This is my feeling from an operator perspective, but what do you think? And people said, oh, if we did this and this, that would be the solution. I always say to any companies trying to start out, and there's probably every single week I have conversations with people wanting advice on their tech and the likes. I sit there when they're explaining to them, what problem are you solving? What's the problem that you're solving? And have a look at that. And that there, if you can't clearly understand the problem that you're solving, then is there a problem in the first place? And that's an important thing to bear in mind.
Dave, you mentioned one of the three characteristics in the people that you hire is adversity. How can you test for that in an interview?
Yeah, so it's one of those questions that we always ask, what's been a hard time in your life, both in business and personal? What's been a hard time? And if people say, oh, I've never had one, then you know that they might be telling a porcupine. But asking them, when have you been really a tough time in your working career? And what did you do with it? How do you view failure? Asking that question. Asking the question in regards to what you're wanting to do. Giving what I like doing, and from a technical perspective, what we do is we have a question. So we've got a complex tech issue, and we'd say, so what would you do to solve that? Because A, they're being put on the spot. B, it's a technical question to sit there and go, and that can help you understand how they deal with an issue that's presented to them that's out of the blue, and what their thinking process is. And that there is an interesting one, because to ask someone during interviews, because then you test how they deal with adversity.
Dave, for the last one, I speak with many people and I always hear two different opinions. One is there are going to be more biomarkers in the future, there are going to be more devices in the future, there are going to be more type of sensors in the future. And the second is there's going to be much less devices in the future. One brand is going to be there and dominate the market and so on. Do you have a third opinion, or are you part of either of those?
Are there going to be continuous? I think as the tech gets, the conductors get smaller, the power, the battery, the whole thing. We've spoken about the likes of ingestibles, where you ingest a tablet and then it displays. There used to be things called patches that you put a patch on. A lot of these, it depends on what you're trying to capture, okay? Because there's only the determinants of physical activity is only measured by two things, right? One is strength and the other is the beat of your heart, cardiovascular work. So what measures physical activity is not how many jiggles or steps or jiggles of a jiggle machine. It's based on 150 minutes of moderate activity per week or 75 minutes of vigorous activity per week plus 2 strength training sessions. That's the only measure of physical activity. That's what measures physical activity. Now there's things such as O-ring. I have an O-ring which measures my sleep. Now the form factor of the O-ring means that I can't lift weights with it, right? As we know, is that I can't lift weights with it, because lifting weights, it'll break it. And at the end of the day, I don't really care about that. I just want to know how much sleep I do at night. There are devices where you can wear, now the MyZone device, we only put this on when we're exercising. So this is not an all-day monitor. Yes, there's all-day monitors out there, But then you've got to start thinking about what are you going to do with all this data? What are you going to do with all this data? And the thing that I suppose, bearing in mind is that there's always going to be more wearable devices coming out there, but you've got to understand the form factor. As an example, I've got a tag watch that will pick up the PPG, it'll pick up my heart rate, okay? But I can't wear that when I go to the gym and I use weights, because when I flex the wrist, it won't work. Same with an Apple Watch. If I start hitting a tennis racket, it won't work. If I start boxing a bag, it's not going to work. You've got to understand what that form factor is, picking up the most accurate thing. But there will always be new developments. So far, nothing has superseded a chest strap in the last 40 years. Nothing as to pick up the ECG of the heart for an accurate reading of the heart. There's nothing that's been able to pick that up as a form factor. Yes, there's hearables. Yes, you can do the rings and stuff like that. No, I'm not going to wear this if I'm going to play tennis. I'm not going to wear these if I go and I do a Spartan race where it's going to go through the water. So you've got to look at the form factor and making sure something is fit for purpose. So will there be more devices? Yeah, of course there will be. Sorry, there you go. There's my Oura Ring. There's a lot more, but you've got to look at what's the problem that's solving. For me, that solves how many hours or how little hours I sleep at night. And I've had the Oura Ring for about 2 or 3 years now, and I find it fascinating to see how many hours I sleep at night. Now, I had a Galaxy watch that could measure if I slept at night, but the problem with that, I'd have to wear my watch to bed, and I don't want to wear my watch to bed. And if I wear my watch to bed, I'm going to have to charge it at some time, because I'm not going to get 6 months battery life out of it. And these are all the problems that we are faced with. Battery consumption sits at the top of that.
Incredible. Dave, very insightful conversation. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. No, it's been great chatting with you, my friend.